Well, the shock departure of incoming Essendon CEO Andrew Thorburn, just 30 hours after his appointment was announced, has reignited religious freedom debate. Mr Thorburn's role was heavily criticised due to his place on the board of a church that's disparaging of homosexuality. While some have labelled his departure discriminatory, Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews has been among the most vocal critics, saying he has no sympathy for the ejected club boss.
Everyone should be treated equally. Everyone should be treated fairly. And for me, that's my Catholicism, that's my faith.
I think people have a right to religious freedom, religious beliefs and personal beliefs, and I don't think that's the matter that may be in question.
I think this is a very significant awakening for the Australian public on a very important issue. I think there has been a very egregious attack on an individual because of his religious beliefs.
Let's bring in Jane Hume and Jenny McAllister on the issue now. Jane, we'll start with you. He lasted 30 hours in the job. Where do you sit on this?
Well, freedom of speech and freedom of religious association are sort of fundamental tenets of Australian society. So I think it's quite concerning that somebody would be discriminated against because of their beliefs when they apply for a job. Because let's face it, where does it stop? It shouldn't matter whether you're a Christian or whether it's Judaism, whether you go to a mosque or whether you go to a temple. As long as you can do the job, as long as you are qualified for the role and your beliefs don't interfere in your execution of that role, well, being vilified for those religious beliefs, I think, is untenable. Now, where the Essendon Football Club goes from here, I don't know. I do feel that mixing politics and sport is not necessarily the best idea, and I would not tell the Essendon Football Club what to do. I'm very disappointed, though, that Daniel Andrews has weighed in on this, that he has somehow condoned the vilification of somebody for their religious beliefs, that he has somehow decided that because what this man believes isn't aligned with his personal beliefs, that he somehow is disqualified from doing the job of a CEO of a football club. I think that's entirely inappropriate of Daniel Andrews.
And Jane, on a more broader matter now, do you believe that this sets a precedent, that this could happen in any workplace based on what you believe in?
I very much hope not. When we had the conversations about religious discrimination, a lot of it was around schools and education and teaching. This is one of the first times, I think, that we've seen the issues play out certainly in sport, but in broader society. And I think that this should be concerning. It is worth the conversation. It is worth the discussion. And look, the good thing is, I think, is that it is a discussion that's being had by ordinary Australians because it is happening in sport. They're turning their minds to this for the first time and wondering whether this form of vilification of somebody for their religious beliefs is the path that we want to go down.
Jenny, has Essendon taken the right approach here in your view? Did Andrew Thorburn have to go?
Look, I'm pretty reluctant to comment on Essendon's decisions. How the Essendon Football Club goes about appointing its CEO is really a matter for them. But I will say this, our country has been well served by policies that tend towards inclusion. We're a nation that is generally pretty intolerant of intolerance. We've got a pretty comprehensive architecture of protections against discrimination that I think have been very important over the last 30 or so years, 40 years actually, in shaping modern Australia. It's an architecture that Australian Labor has been deeply involved in constructing, and we're very proud of it, and we'd always seek to defend it and where we need to extend it.
Okay, but do you think then it's appropriate for somebody to be sacked or to leave a role based on perhaps their views or what they believe in?
Look, you want a country where people can get ahead, no matter who they love, no matter who they worship. And actually, you heard the Prime Minister talking about that on election night in his speech on that evening. He talked about these very issues. It shouldn't matter who you love, where you live, who you worship, or frankly, what your last name is. Yes. You should be able to get on with your life and to be part of an inclusive society. Sorry, Danica.
So I was going to say, so then do you believe that Essendon has made the right decision here? Should he have gone, or should he have been able to stay in that role?
Look, we don't have a lot of information about what transacted between the leadership of the club and Mr Thorburn, and I'm pretty reluctant to wade into it without that information. I don't think it's fair. But I will say this. We went to the last election acknowledging that it would be a good thing if we could extend the anti-discrimination provisions to include the protection of religious belief. Now, those anti-discrimination provisions have been built up over many years, starting with the Whitlam government, key interventions under the Hawke and Keating governments, also under the Rudd-Gillard government. We are interested in moving that debate forward, and I think you'll see the Attorney-General have something to say about that in the coming months.
OK, but does this set a precedent now? I asked Jane the same question. So, Jenny, do you believe that this now sets a precedent for other workplaces to follow suit?
As I said to you, I'm pretty reluctant to weigh into the details about what happened between Mr Thorburn.
No, but I'm talking in general.
I don't have all the information to make a judgment.
But in a general sense, though, does this set a precedent now for other workplaces to follow suit based on a person's beliefs?
There's an important conversation to be had about the shape of legislation that might be put in place to protect people against religious discrimination. We know that Australians do experience it in a range of areas, whether it's a woman in a hijab or a young man in a yarmulke. We want to make sure that people can get on with their lives without interference. That's an important policy question. I think the implications of the Essendon decision, as I said, are hard to understand because we don't understand everything that transpired between Mr Thorburn and the club.